Ah, Jacob.
He's a nice guy. Not much, just a video showcasing Jacob in that fish out of water tutorial level. He's the most normal, straight up guy. He seems like the most level headed person around. His loyalty mission deals with one of the most disturbing adult situations, and he wants to.
Spill some drinks on the Citadel.
Jacob has three problems. The first, like other characters have, is the almost forced romance. Female Shepherd either has to talk to him romantically or not at all. Now, if you want to go ahead and garner Jacob's affections, well, a few issues arise.
Look at this. Sneaking into the captain's quarters. Heavy risk, but the prize. I want all the time I can get.
I'm not sure if women like this, but I found that kind of creepy. I can't help thinking how many giggles Jennifer Hale was having, because her tone changes from monotone to ridiculously corny girl flirt. The player has almost no control on this. But the clincher is, in order to romance anyone, you have to do their loyalty mission. At the end of Jacob's, he says this line about his previous relationship with Miranda.
She requires a better man than I.
So at this point, you're thinking, okay, great, you just called yourself a piece of crap. Not exactly scoring any points here, man. The second thing that makes Jacob perhaps the worst character is the attempt to have a character arc. And boy, does this guy have some issues to deal with, but he never actually deals with any of them. The writers set up all kind of issues: the Alliance, Council, Cerberus, Tim, Miranda, Thane, Zaid, Legion, and eventually his dad, whom he sort of doesn't really care about, but really does, and even himself, considering he dislikes mercenaries, and he is one. As soon as we complete his loyalty mission, he completely closes himself off, and no amount of dialogue will get him to share. So what the hell was the point? The third problem, and this occurs with Miranda when we board the Normandy, is the two seem to switch personalities. Miranda suddenly becomes friendly, open and decent, and Jacob becomes frigid, standoffish, and bland. That might be realistic to most people in typical military or business-style relationships, but it is nothing for his development. It's like his loyalty barrier skill is also some kind of psychological one. And then there's this.
The chance of coming back is small.
And you know this how? He doesn't even know what we're up against, so how can any evaluation be made? Jacob's a paragon, so he probably just wants to do the right thing. He's part of Project Lazarus, whose point was to stop human colonies from being abducted. Mandatory. I have no idea. He's the Kirilenko of Mass Effect 2. Maybe to give the idea that Cerberus isn't a whole bunch of crazy, human-centric, murdering xenophiles, and are a bunch of nice guys who are really boring? Jacob's loyalty mission is the worst, having one of the most convoluted plots. There are so many things wrong. First, after all this time, Jacob gets a ping about a ship he's been looking for that has his long-lost father, and it just so happens to have occurred now. Couldn't anyone from the company his father was a part of, or he himself, hired a ship and checked out what happened to that long-lost ship? What's left is a crew of a crashed ship that survived after 10 years on a planet with plant life for food that make them have something called neural decay. They end up having problems with higher cognitive functions like reading. However, some healthy food from the ship was saved but not shared with everyone. Now, if you're stranded on a planet in the wilderness with other people, and if 5 officers take charge, start hoarding the only healthy food around, and the only alternative is other food that makes your brain degrade, there is going to be a massive riot. Starving people will fight and kill over food. Now, there is a riot by individuals, but not everyone. That's nuts. Aside from fear of violent force at the beginning, this wouldn't happen in a survival situation. Everyone involved would want food and wouldn't sit around hoping for treatment later while they lose their minds. This goes on for 10 years. The one guy in charge now has a 9-year supply of healthy food. This is almost completely unbelievable. It took about a year to repair the distress beacon. Aside from securing food, this would be the #1 goal. But because everyone's forced or willingly lost their marbles, the guy in charge doesn't tell anyone 1 year later. Because
When the beacon was ready, revealing what happened didn't seem like a good idea.
the only way this could have happened was the same people who didn't eat the bad plant life at the start were killed off immediately. I'm guessing by the 5 officers, which is nuts because there'd be a massive riot. Everyone on the ship was a member of a private group to go on a survey mission. This implies ethical, educated scientists like geologists, engineers, and medical people. These would be colleagues and friends of who they were trying to survive with. Yet 5 officers who are part of medical engineering and the bridge staff decide to not want to get rescued as soon as possible and instead kill others and watch what happens as their colleagues get neural decay. Why? Just get the hell out of there. Not only for their own sake, but everyone else's. We'd look like
big goddamn heroes.
that native plant life would be a pretty good research specimen too. So it all ends up becoming an adult Lord of the Flies, despite Jacob's dad being the guy who taught him how to be moral. There's gotta be way more exposition on that character change. There's a female encampment where women were treated as property to the 5 officers. These officers must have been the most vile and disgusting people to plan out something like this against their team, so that they could get into this harem situation, I guess. And Ronald Taylor must have plotted their demise somehow since he was controlling the mechs. And during that first year, not one person of those 5 people eating good food wanted to get off the planet. So you're in the future, in space, and you want to live like a caveman? Why? This is even more unbelievable since we eventually learn the 5 officers got killed within the first week after the beacon was repaired, which is in the first year. Now, if they all perished at once, I can buy it, but if not, wouldn't the last officer alive have noticed a pattern? As all his non-mentally retarded friends in charge started dying? Wouldn't they immediately rush to activate the beacon? Wouldn't it be a pretty funny conversation with Ronald, like, "Hey Ron, it looks like we're the only 2 sane people left. I wonder how long our food is going to last, now that the 4 other sane people are all dead. Wow, we got a harem all to ourselves and..." Then there's the plot hole of the guns and mechs. I've no problems believing there were weapons on the ship, but not thermal clip-based ones. The guns and mechs weren't even invented 10 years ago, so did they magically crash land on the planet 2 years ago? How did a bunch of male hunters suddenly get hold of them without using up all the ammunition? 'Cause, oh yeah, BioWare retconned how guns work. Or upgraded them, or whatever. Either way, they need ammo, but apparently firing a gun for years doesn't make it lose this ammo or stop from working while in the wilderness. This is the same with the other technology like mechs not needing repairs or ammunition, or a 9-year-old beacon, or data pads and the like, when everyone has no brain power to fix things. 2 other minor gripes. The types of plant food these people are eating and the lack of proper farming and or irrigation to support a society, unless they're just eating the plants directly from the ground or something. Considering their lack of cognitive function, that sounds about right. And if there was an agriculturalist, their brains are retarded, so they wouldn't know they'd be getting proper nutrition or how to farm. I was imagining a scene from Castaway where most of the plant life is stripped bare from the ground. And 2, the hunters are just men who decided enough is enough, we gotta stop this. But because Shepard only knows lethal force, he kills them. These people just wanted to survive, so they took their mentally retarded frustration out on Shepard and Jacob, the guy who looks like the person in charge. I'm not saying it's strange for Shepard to defend themselves, but this was a distress beacon. You're here to save these people, not kill them. We already know their minds are degraded, so it's not their fault. But the only help that Shepard can give is from the barrel of a lethal gun. At first I thought, how very odd that some random mentally retarded stranger can identify Jacob as having Ronald Taylor's face. But Ronald himself can't identify what his son would look like after 10 years. Maybe there wasn't a mirror lying around despite both having the same haircut and reasonable facial hair grooming. But ironically, this is an excellent illusion of the change that Ronald went through, that he wouldn't even be able to identify his straight-laced son that he raised with his own morals, after the 10 years of being a king and having his morals slide into depravity. So I kinda like that. Jacob ends up being mysteriously useful as a team leader despite having no leadership experience we can point to. Why this occurs we don't know. He is ranked as a lieutenant, so I guess that grants him some kind of military training, but nothing in a leadership role. Well, we all know the suicide run choices are illogical at best, so whatever. So thank you BioWare for giving us yet another version of Karth with the best set of pecs. Here's hoping you can outdo yourself in the sequel. Actually, an email would be awesome too, thanks. Now that we looked at one of the worst, let's look at one of the best.